looking at the Handmaidens, or when the boat goes out.
Right you are, men. We'll get down to the Secretary to read the minutes of the annual general meeting, 1981.
Minutes of annual general meeting held April the 8th, 1981.
It's not often you see the full working membership of a trade union all gathered together in one spot. But here they are, the Tyne Tugboatmen's Association, formerly known as the Tyne Steam Packet Providence Society, with just 56 working members, which they reckon makes them the smallest non-affiliated trade union in the land. Never mind that the Sheffield Wool Shearers or the Huddersfield Cloth Pressers Society say they're even smaller. The Tyne men's claim is good enough for them, and they're certainly the smallest union afloat and getting smaller.
Part of the amount of loss. Unfortunately, we had a number of deaths last year which hasn't been shown for a number of years. We had 5 of our members died: Laurie Ostrick, Harry Allen, Billy Morris, Alex Brown.
Once there were far more tugboatmen on the Tyne, but then there were far more tugs. From 147 vessels in the boom years a century ago, the fleet has shrunk to just 7 today. But few or many, the question remains, just what does a tugboat do?
You're sort of a ship's handmaid in the ship, and, you know, if a ship moves, you've got to be there to move it, you tend on it. You know. If it gets into trouble, you've got to be there to get it out of trouble. If it runs on the rocks, you're there to pull it off the rocks. If it catches fire, you're there. You know, sometimes they call you pirates, because you get involved in salvage and things like that.
The feeling amongst us, the men, is that the tugs in the river belong to us, not the tug owners, because it's in our blood. All the tugboatmen came from the same area of the town, all living next door to each other. Sket-enders was our nickname.
Ship, Texaco, Great Britain. May God bless her and all who sail in her.
Tugboats chug into the real limelight mostly when big ships are launched. It's the grand occasion, and though the tugs are physically dwarfed, they become fussily important, like a pack of terriers having a go at an elephant. But launches are rarities these days, and there's much more to tugboat work than the glamour. Big ships come and go, and the tugboatmen carry on, working a little world of their own, their skills handed down guardedly from father to son, though the older men will rarely resist the temptation to point out how much harder the life was in the old days.
Oh dear me. Just the workshops, you know. Nobody had any of the boat I served my time in, there was no electric lights, paraffin lamps, you know. And that was your job. Part of your job was trimming all the lights, paraffin lights, you know. Coal galley fires. A lot tougher life than what it is now, you know.
The tugboat service began here on the River Tyne, like so much else to do with the sea. First of all, they were little paddle steamers, manned by the old keelmen, who'd lost their trade of punting coal barges to the sailing ships and had to adapt to survive. They were a tight-knit, independent lot, a race apart, and they took their pride with them to the tugs.
Even when the job was bad, I'm 47, I was 15. When the job was bad, I enjoyed it. I can never remember not enjoying the job. I think that's an important thing, then.
Nevertheless, not all tugboatmen's time was spent afloat. Sometimes they felt the need to show themselves to the world, to swagger a little perhaps. They had a banner all of their own, beautifully woven in silk and gold braid, and they had their own regalia. Useless gear in a high gale at sea, but it looked pretty snazzy in the street.
The majority of tugboat men at that stage were temperance men, rather strange, and they organised. When there was a temperance meeting anywhere, a general meeting, they took part in the Good Friday marches with their banner, and the members wore their regalia. At a general meeting of members, they also wore their regalia, and the medallion that they produced was a declaration, "United to assist." And this was the reason why they made sure that any member of the tugboat men or the dependents of tugboat men, if a person died, they were assured of a proper burial, and when a woman was having her baby, they did guarantee that there would be a benefit payable to allow the woman to engage a doctor. And so there were many assistances that this organisation gave to their people.
They don't wear the regalia anymore, but the Tyne Tugboatmen still have a union. Its General Secretary, Harry Malcolm, is 75 now, and he's been a member since he was a lad, when he followed his father into tugboat work. Once the union men proudly built their own headquarters, not afloat but high and dry at North Shields. Today it's just an accommodation address. Harry Malcolm comes to collect the mail and to see if the local yobbos have left anything intact.
Well, the vandalism did create a bit of a feeling to me because we couldn't keep these windows in. The main hall was constantly being broken.
These days, Harry Malcolm's visits to his office are sadder than they used to be. Lonelier, too.
I used to come here with my mother to pay father's union dues. The meeting room was available to any of the tugboat men if they wanted to have a party, a wedding reception, or any such thing. And then they used to organise occasionally social evenings where they would have dancing and square dancing, the lancers and these sort of things, so that if one judges trades union today against what this organisation, association has been all its years, you see, it isn't in the same field. It's been a family association more than ever it was a trades union. It did represent the men. My father was very active in this, so was my eldest brother, and when I finished at 65, it was the break of a link of over 100 years, and there are many of the tugboat families the same. And my childhood, well, every tugboat family, the boys used to go aboard the tugs with their father from 4, 5, 6, depending upon an elder brother taking the little one. And so I was knocking about tugboats from 12 months old, I would say. The new pension scheme's been in for, say, 3 years.
3 years.
Now, from the inception of the scheme until it stopped, you paid in so much money, that deduction was there. Now, what we can't understand is why everyone isn't credited with the same amount.
We've all paid the same.
Because the employers agreed that if a man was from work, they would keep the payment up.
If this is it, somebody is making money somewhere, and it isn't us.
No, it's
No, well, if money lies around, somebody makes money out of it.
Well,
there's no doubt about it.
The insurance company claims that on the basis that other than a pension scheme, it was also a full insurance for £3,000. £300, you see.
Right, but it appears to me that a lot of answers we
I'll make a proposition if it comes in with this.
I'll second that.
Yeah.
The only other information I've got on this is that they are keeping this pension going for the retired members. The retired members, and through our money being still in this legal and general, this is keeping all the retired members in their pension.
Yeah, right, Phil. About amidships, we make fast about amidships, okay?
Yes, the riggers are coming for you there now, Brian.
Right, now.
The type of work changes all the time. First it was sailing ships, then steam, then huge oil tankers. Now the North Sea oil industry is serviced by big ugly flat-bottomed barges which resemble the old sailing ships about as much as a dirty old hippo looks like an albatross.
Can you put a bit round that middle one, Bill, midships? Then I can't come use your head on it. Well, this part of the river coming round the bends with the ebb tide is the most awkward part of the operation. Once we get round this naval yard corner, we're more or less on a straight tour then, so the job's not as awkward. If there's any sort of, the ship takes a sheer, there might be a bit breeze of wind across the river, you allow for tide, wind, and you just position your tug accordingly, you know, which just comes with years of practice and, you know.
Do you ever make mistakes at all?
Well, if you make a mistake, it's very costly. You either smash the tug up or you drown somebody. You can imagine coming up here with a ship in the dark, winter's night, eh? One of the worst nights I've ever put in on a tug, black dark, blizzard, and the snow is on the wind. It's not coming down, straight down. The snow is coming horizontal, straight into your eyes. You're trying to look for the lights and that, you know. You can't see a bloody thing. Your eyes are like chapel hat pegs, you know. All the time. That is the main factor, the weather, wind, tide on our job. That's what you've got to think about all the time. You've got to be not one jump ahead, you've got to be two jumps ahead, you see. Or more.
But the principle's still much the same. Tie on, pull or push until you've got the craft where it's wanted. Just like taking the dog for a walk, really, except there are dogs and dogs.
Have you got much further ahead, Phil?
No, you can't go much further now. If you just take it easy, well, I know what's under the key.
Right, I'll just keep this bit weight on then. This particular tug, there's two of the north side on this one. They were actually built to attend the super tankers that were building here. This one's 1,450 horse. German engine, Deutsch engine. Very good engine, slow running, and it's a bit more reliable. That's my idea anyway. I like these engines. You're letting go the weir side now, Phil, are you?
Yes, if you just keep going till we get another one out, Brian, please.
Yeah, right, we'll give a bit weight on until she gets another head up on. As he sails into the sunset there, you see that?
The river today is a very different, emptier place than when these old tugboat owners knew it round the turn of the century. The other thing they knew was that although their men felt independent, there were ways of exploiting them.
When I was first married and I had 2 children, I've seen us go 3 weeks and never see the children awake. Every time I got ashore, they were in bed, and when you came in, you never had any contact with the children. You just looked in the room, they were asleep, and that was it.
You even had to scull ashore then. There was all small boats where you used to lie, and you had to scull ashore with small boats with the crew. And at the time you had to take your oar home with you for fear somebody pinched it.
Keep the oar under the bed.
You used to put the oar in your backyard. Did you? And when you used to come out of your bed in the morning, you might have been in bed an hour, and you were put your oar on your shoulder, walking down, and you had to be there for when the men was there.
In the old days, the northeast coast trade was so busy they reckon you could almost walk across the River Tyne on the decks of the vessels. There were ships carrying fish, glass, chemicals, iron, and of course coal, millions and millions of tons of coal. Ships were sailing and ships were building, and the tugs were busy all round the clock. Men worked all the hours God sent, until the union won a guaranteed weekly day off, plus payment for overtime. Though even now they still average 60 hours a week.
My father was on the committee at that time, and he says that was one of the finest things I thought they had getting, because you never had any sort of home life, you see, because your wife never knew when you were going to come in, you know. When you went out, you never knew. For all you just walked on the river, they used to come on the bank tops and have a look down to see whether your tug was mooring or not, you see.
What is the one thing that the union has done to make the job a better?
The overtime and your day off. The overtime, when you were paid, you started to be paid by the hour. Before that, you were only paid by the ship. Now, as I say, you could be all night for one ship's pay. You used to get, I think it was about 6 bob then. 6 bob you used to get for one ship's pay. So you could be 15 hours aboard the tug at night for one ship's pay of 6 shillings.
Or maybe a weekend. No.
Or maybe a weekend. From the Saturday, they should send you down the Saturday, dinner time. You were there till the Monday morning, looking for a ship, you see. Looking, they says, oh, you're looking for a ship.
If the ship didn't come that you're looking for, you only got a half a crown in those days, yeah.
I started as a grub boy. You had to go around the houses, they put you ashore and sent you around the houses for the food. So at that time there used to be bait hankies there were, you see. They used to put the next day's dinner, the gravy and whatever they were putting in for them, and then tie them all together into a knot, and you had to go for 6 grubs. Well, you know, 6 grubs. Well, I was caught at the time. I used to take me girl around with us. That's the only time I'm going to see her, so she had to come around and get the grubs for it.
Even the very small boats went seeking when it was found that there were more tugs available for the work that was available in the port. Then, of course, some of them put to sea, and they would barter their service with a ship, especially if you had an east wind. The tug would go out and you would approach a vessel and ask him if he could tow him into port, whether it was Middlesbrough, Hartlepool. They used to drift away down as far as Beachy Head, you see. And it's amazing how these small vessels, single-engine paddle boats, wooden hull, used to be able to do this sort of thing. And they'd travel up to Scotland and take a towage anywhere.
Well, I think I was in the last tug that towed a sailing vessel in here, a vessel called Killeoran.
Yeah.
It's towed from about Scarborough Hand to Tyne Dock for £25.
Yeah.
And I thought myself, like, it was the finest sight I ever saw in my life. Because when we connected up with the sailing ship,
Oh, it's a beautiful ship.
all the sails went aback and all the lads were up stowing the rigging, you know. It was a beautiful sight. And the decks were like this. Because I went into Tyne Dock with a bill, to get the bill signed. And our decks were, you just think they had been varnished. It was beautiful, the ship aboard, you know.
What was the river like in those days? Again, compared
You
with...
couldn't get
Oh,
you had to wait.
What?
You had to wait a one ship sailing out of Tyne Dock before another one could get in.
You couldn't get in.
When one considers that these men from the Tyne, and we were the first, you see, the first port to have a towage service, and they migrated from here, that these men could find their way around the coast, even down to the Channel, and right up to the Forth, didn't know the first thing about navigation, and even when navigation did come in, you know, their theory and theme at the time was red to red, green to green, and you're a first-class navigator, you see. Blow 1, blow 2, blow 3, and that's it. And that was your sort of navigation.
But it worked?
It worked. They were very, very practical men.
When you think that our men, after they served their apprenticeship, they knew so much that they could repair the engines and that. to be the engineer. They weren't known as engineers, they were known as enginemen, you see. Now, if the master was leaving the tug or taken ill or anything, that engine man could go onto the bridge and work that tug, taking her to sea, towing sailing ships in and out the ports, and which was no easy job for these single-engine tugs. They were difficult to manoeuvre, far more difficult than ever the younger members could believe. They were a very unhandy thing, and yet the double-engine tug that came along, there's never been anything to beat her.
Today you might look at the mouth of the Tyne and wonder where all the shipping went. Surely not all wrecked. But of course there's wreckage in economics, trade winds that gust from bank to insurance company and blow ships to newer ports. But the northeast coast did have more than its fair share of wrecks. Hundreds of ships were lost every year. Just here at the mouth of the Tyne was a particularly bad spot. Winds could blow ships onto the sands across the estuary or onto the rocks here, the notorious Black Middens. But they weren't always pulling wrecks off rocks. The tugboatmen had their leisure time too. And if the men couldn't get ashore, the families had to go to the men.
There was a waiting buoy just down in the haven here, and to accommodate the children, the crew would arrange for swings under the paddle box bridge. Now, strange to say, 3 of the crew, my father one of them, were keen fiddlers. And with 3 or 4 of the wives aboard as well, and many children, the 3 fiddlers would get on the after deck. They had arranged forms for the ladies and the children, and they would go through the Sankey and Moody hymn book. You would be singing various hymns there, and it was usual to see the people out walking on the Tynemouth Pier out for an afternoon walk. They would stand in the vicinity to hear the singing, no doubt wondering now which sort of religious organization this was, having a meeting halfway on into the river.
Then I thought the tugboatmen had a reputation for being hard swearing, hard drinking, tough sort of people altogether.
Well, it may be that there were 1 or 2 characters like that, you see. But of course, there were the opposite side. We had one tugmaster called, he was christened Hallelujah Harry, and now it wasn't any use a man going to him for a job as a fireman or deckhand if he did drink, because that was one of the first questions he asked him. Do you drink? And if he said, well, just an odd pint, he said, well, you're no good to me.
The tugboatmen may always have been united in the trade union sense, but there was an almost literally cutthroat rivalry between boat and boat. After all, money was at stake, and money can get men up to all sorts of tricks.
They used to change the lights on the tugs, put the starboard light on the port side and the port one on the starboard light, that you didn't know which way he's going. That was for somebody following you. That was competition. You were breaking each other's necks. The one that got there first got the job. And when you were quoting with the master of the sailing ship for the price, if he wasn't satisfied, if the other chap couldn't hand you shoot him. Yeah, you shoot him, and you murder him when you go to shore.
You should say, give him a clanger, but they have crews.
If the skipper decided that a man wasn't suitable and he had committed a misdemeanor one way or the other, probably just slept in 2 mornings running, he would say, put your coat on, you don't belong this boat, you see.
I could tell you a tale about that. I got married when I was 19 anyhow, so I was quite young. And I don't know, you'll be the same when you're married. When I first married, you seemed to like the bed. And the first morning I slept in, the second morning I slept in, the skipper, as my dad was right then, like, he was on waiting for us the next morning. He says, sleep in the morning, didn't bother coming. So the next day I got 2 alarm clocks, 2 plates, lying in bed with these 2 long clocks ticking, and the wife says, is this what I've got to go through all my life with you? And I said, well, if you want us to walk in the Tugs, but this is what you've got to stand.
They still talk on the Tyne about the day they launched the Mauritania from Wallsend in 1907. It was the biggest liner ever built on the river, and alarm clocks or none, even the tugboatmen's wives would have been proud that day, though their husbands nearly missed it.
On the first occasion for sea trials, they brought Dutch tugs, which were very heavy-powered vessels, but the tugboat men of that day objected to foreigners coming doing our work, and when she did actually sail later, the Tyne Tugs, even though they were paddle tugs, did manage to do that job to the credit of everyone concerned.
One of the more macabre aspects of a tugboatman's work used to be burials at sea. These have become woven into the folklore, lurid tales of coffins that wouldn't sink, caskets of ashes which went the wrong way.
The day we went away with the werewolf was a bit nasty, wasn't it?
Oh, aye. Oh,
you know, it was a bit squally, and we could only put the relatives and that in the wheelhouse, you see. And then the vicar made the sermon, of course, and he put the casket overboard. Well, that was, I thought, was silly, because it floated. You know, instead of being a sinker on it, it just floated, aye. And the dust went, you know.
The dust blew right back again on them.
The Tyne Tugboatmen's Association has not always found it easy to keep its individuality or to hold fast to its roots. Bigger unions have tried to take it over and got some sympathy in high places in the attempt.
Because at one time we went down to London to get affiliated with the TUC. Girl was there, and where? The secretary, the 3 we went down there to get affiliated with the TUC. We met Vic Feather at that time, and Vic Feather said to us, well, you're too small a union for to get affiliated. He says, if you take my advice, laddie, he says, what you want to do is go back there and join a bigger union, because you'll have to be big to fight these big bosses. He says, because they're all amalgamating, and he says the unions has got to be big to fight big.
Well, I informed Mr. Feather that we hadn't come down for advice on that particular subject, but to be part of the TUC. And he was a bit nettled by my attitude and said, listen, laddie, several years ago, if you don't join the big boys, he said, you're going to get your arse kicked by them. To date, that hasn't happened, and I think we're well capable of looking after ourselves. Nobody's going to take us over. We're a registered union, free body of men, democratic, perhaps more democratic than most, and I think part of the strength of this union is the fact that we have direct contact with the men who do the job, because we do the job with them. Because of this, any problem that might arise gets dealt with straight away. It doesn't get magnified because it's been put to one side, and the result being perhaps a breakdown, a strike or whatever. We deal with it straight away to the men's satisfaction in every case.
The North East Coast has changed out of all recognition in the life of the Tugboatmen's Union. But there is still trade, and so long as lumps of metal and machinery float about the world, or at least until they can make them so nimble they can tuck themselves into their berths, there'll be a need for the tugboats, the Handmaidens. And there would seem to be no shortage of men to guide those same maidens.
It's a disease, and that's what it is. And it's a disease that, it's one of them diseases that you sort of stomach, you know, and you just go on, you know.
I think we're all very proud of our job.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
When it comes down to it, we're all, if we go anywhere and anybody asks, where do you work? And you say the tugs, and they ask about certain big ships, the SO Northumbria, Great Britain, we're all very proud to say we took part in manoeuvring them down the river. The river might seem the same to you, but it's interesting, and it changes every day. There's always something of interest to see on the river.
When you wake up, if it's Siberia in your slippers, the Baltic in your bathroom, and positively Vladivostok on the landing, then you need gas central heating. Just set the gas central heating clock, and it will automatically turn on the radiators not just in one room, but all over the house, and give you piping hot water whenever you want it. So, when you wake up, it's the Bahamas in your bedroom, Bali in the bathroom, in fact, possibly Hawaii all over the house. Get to a better climate. Go by gas.
At your new Presto Food Market in Darlington, you'll now find a new in-store bakery for the freshest bread and rolls baked daily on the premises. A superb range of the season's finest fruit and vegetables. The choicest meat and poultry, prepared by our own master butcher. A range of groceries that's second to none, and Red Dot for really low prices. At your new Presto Food Market in East Street, Darlington.
Rest of the world, but township violence is now firmly under control. Other problems, though, don't respond to pure force. Unemployment is endemic here, and skill centres can't manufacture jobs. And it's the lack of jobs which breeds frustration and despair. This is Bill Frost for the 6 o'clock news in Crossroads.
There was more bad news for the city today. After yesterday's record trade deficit and a 1% increase in interest rates, today there was a slump in profits for one of the best-known car makers in the country. Jaguar Motors announced that in the first half of the year it made a profit of only £22.5 million. That's down more than £45 million on the same period last year. The company blamed a sharp fall in sales in the United States because of the strong pound. The city was worried that Jaguar could be the first in a series of victims of a strong pound and high interest rates. At the close of business, the 100 share index closed down 9.5 points at 1770.7. The pound was down just over half a cent against the dollar at just over $1.69.
David Reddaway, the Foreign Office man visiting Iran, is to be allowed to see Roger Cooper, a British businessman jailed on spying charges.